She stood on the edge of a broken world. The wind blew across the ruins of her palace, the ashes of a kingdom lost. Once, she was their queen, their pride, their future. Now, she was just a widow, forgotten, left behind by the stars. No one sent help, no one cared. The Galactic Council turned their backs, but in the shadows of space, a human was watching, and he saw something in her that no one else did. He was not there for politics, not for war. He was there for her. She stood alone on the broken ground. The sky above her was dark and full of dust. Her long silver robe moved gently in the wind. Her name was Salin. She was once a queen. Now, she was just a widow. Her planet had been full of life. Her people had built tall towers, glowing lights, and peaceful cities. But all of that was gone now. Only silence remained. The tall towers were broken. The cities were empty, and the stars above seemed cold. Salin looked at the sky every night. She waited for help. She waited for someone to come, but no one did, not even the Galactic Council. They had promised peace. They had promised safety. But when her world needed them the most, they said nothing. They gave no answers, no support, just silence. She sent messages. She begged for aid. But the answers that came were cold and empty. We are sorry for your loss. We regret your pain. We can do nothing. She knew what those words really meant. They had forgotten her. They had no use for a widow. Salin walked through her palace garden. The flowers no longer bloomed. The water in the fountain had turned still. She sat on a stone bench and closed her eyes. She remembered his voice, her mate, the king. He had strong hands and a soft smile. He had believed in peace. He had died for it. Now, she was alone, but far away, on a quiet Earth ship floating near the edge of the system. A human watched the screen carefully. His name was Captain Rourke. He had read the reports. He had seen the Council's words, but something didn't sit right with him. He stared at her image on the monitor. She looked proud, even in sadness. She sat straight, her hands folded, her eyes calm but full of something deep, something heavy. She doesn't belong on that list, Rourke said softly. A younger officer turned to him. What list? Sir, the list of people we ignore. Rourke replied. The officer said nothing more. Rourke had studied her history. Salin had led her people with peace. She had stopped wars. She had spoken at the Great Assembly with wisdom. She was loved by many. But after her mate passed, the Council lost interest in her. There was no power in helping a widow, no profit, no headlines. Rourke didn't like politics. He liked people. Back on the quiet world, Salin walked through the halls of her empty palace. Each step echoed like a memory. She passed paintings of old kings. She passed flags that once stood proud. And then she heard a soft sound, a chime from the old communication room. She stopped. It had been many days since the last message. Most were empty or cold, but this one was different. It was short, and it came from Earth. Do you still wish to be heard? That was all it said. Salin stared at the words for a long time. She placed her hand on the screen. Her fingers trembled slightly. No one had asked her that before. Not in many months. She didn't answer right away. She sat quietly and thought. Later that night, as the stars slowly moved across the sky, she walked outside. The wind was soft. The moon above was large and pale blue. She looked up and whispered, maybe, just maybe, far above, on the Earth ship. Captain Rourke saw the signal blink. It was a single word. Yes. He leaned back in his chair and nodded slowly. Then let's go meet a queen. The engines of the ship hummed gently as the course was set. No one else knew. The Council would not approve. But Rourke had made his choice. Salin waited by the landing platform the next day. She wore a simple cloak, no crown, no guards, just quiet strength. As the Earth ship slowly came down from the sky, dust rose around her. The door opened with a soft sound, and Captain Rourke stepped out. He looked at her. She looked at him. Neither spoke at first. Then he said, I'm sorry it took us so long. She nodded. I stopped counting the days. He stepped forward and offered his hand. We don't have much, he said, but we haven't forgotten you. She looked at his hand. Then she took it. And in that simple moment, something changed, not just for her, but for 2 worlds. Asterisk the wind was soft as the Earth ship slowly lifted her off the old platform. Salin sat near the window, watching her world grow smaller and smaller. Her home, once full of voices and life, was now quiet and gray. She closed her eyes, trying not to remember everything she had lost. But even in the silence, her heart was heavy. Captain Rourke sat across from her. He didn't speak. He gave her space. He had seen many things in the galaxy: broken planets, lost leaders, forgotten promises. But this was different. She wasn't just another name on a report. There was something in her eyes that stayed with him. When the ship finally left her planet's orbit, she opened her eyes again. "Where are we going?" she asked quietly. "To Earth," Rourke answered. "But not the main cities. Somewhere quiet, somewhere safe." She gave a slow nod. "I don't trust many places now." "You don't have to," he replied. "Just trust this one step." She didn't answer, but she looked at him longer this time. The journey took 2 days. During that time, Rourke offered her food, water, and rest. She accepted the basics. But she didn't talk much. Only when the stars passed by the window did she speak again. "Why did you come for me?" she asked. Rourke looked up from the tablet in his hands. "Because no one else would." "That's not a reason," she said softly. "That's a reaction." He smiled gently. "Then maybe I just believe you still matter." She turned her eyes away but didn't speak again. When the ship arrived near Earth, they didn't land in any large spaceport. Instead, they moved toward a quiet outpost by a lake. The sun was setting behind the mountains. A gentle orange light touched the sky, and birds flew peacefully across the water. "This is where you'll stay for now," Rourke said. "No reporters, no officers, just quiet." Salin stepped out and looked around. The place was simple, a small home made of glass and stone, surrounded by trees. The lake shined under the sky. "It's peaceful," she said. Rourke nodded. "Sometimes peace is more powerful than words." For the next few days, she rested. She walked near the lake, watched the clouds move, and sat near the trees. The pain in her heart didn't leave, but it began to feel lighter, like it was no longer crushing her. Earth felt different, not because it was beautiful, but because people here didn't expect her to be strong all the time. One evening, Rourke joined her near the lake. The sky was full of stars again. "You knew my mate, didn't you?" she asked suddenly. Rourke looked at her carefully. "I saw him speak once at the Galactic Assembly. He said one line I never forgot." "What did he say?" "Even when the stars turn cold, kindness is still a light." She closed her eyes. "Yes, that was him." Rourke sat beside her. "I think he believed in peace too much for their liking. They called him weak," she said, "but he held our people together." He nodded. "And they called you a widow, but you're still holding something bigger." She looked at him now, more seriously. "Why are you really helping me, Captain?" He didn't answer right away. Then he leaned forward and said, "Because I think your story is not finished, and someone wants it buried." Her face changed. "You think there's more to what happened?" "I don't just think. I know. There are reports, small details that don't match. There's a private channel Earth intercepted, a message that was never shared." Her voice dropped. "What did the message say?" "That someone was planning to remove your world's voice from the council, quietly, without war, without notice." She stood up slowly, her eyes full of thought. "They didn't just forget us. They chose to." Rourke nodded. "I believe. You were never meant to survive politically. But something changed." She looked at him. "You mean me?" "No," he said gently. "You were always strong. I mean the fact that you're still here, that they didn't expect you to keep standing." She didn't speak for a moment. Then she whispered, "I think I still have something my mate left behind." Rourke raised his eyebrow. "What is it?" She looked at the stars and said, "A message, one only I could read. I never understood it, but maybe now I should." And with that, the lake reflected her image, still calm, still standing, and no longer alone. The air was cool inside the human building. Soft lights filled the room, and the walls were made of smooth white stone and glass. Salin stood in front of a long table. On the table was a small metal box, old, dusty, and strange in design. She had kept it hidden since the day her mate passed. Captain Rourke stood a few steps away. He watched silently as she opened the box for the first time in years. Inside was a small crystal cube. It glowed faintly, like it still held some memory. Some part of him. Salin touched it gently. A blue light blinked once, then again. She looked at Rourke. "It's coded," she said. "He told me I would know when the time was right to open it." "And now?" Rourke asked. She gave a slow nod. "Now I understand why he left it to me." Rourke handed her a translator device. "This will help. Earth tech reads most crystal data." She placed the cube in the slot. At first, nothing happened. Then the room dimmed, and a soft light came from the walls. A voice began to play low. Steady, familiar. It was her mate. "If you are hearing this," the message began, "then I have failed in my final task, and you, my light, are still alive." Salin closed her eyes for a moment. The voice continued, "There are things I was not allowed to say, things I learned too late. The council, some of them are hiding the truth. They want control, they want silence, and they fear the voice of peace." The message paused. Then came another voice, different, sharper. It was a recording from a council meeting. "We cannot allow her to speak again," the voice said. "She will bring attention to what we did. Let her fade. Let the world forget her." Rourke looked at Salin in shock. "They planned it." "Yes," she said quietly. "They wanted my silence, not because I am weak, but because I remind them of what they tried to hide." She stood up. "I cannot stay here anymore. I have to show this to someone." Rourke shook his head gently. "Not yet. If they find out you have this, they might act fast. We have to be careful." "But hiding only helps them," she said. "I have stayed silent long enough." He placed a hand on the table. "Then let me help you bring it out the right way." They decided to contact an old friend of Rourke's, a human analyst named Dr. Emran. She worked in Earth's intelligence division, far from the capital, deep in a quiet research zone. She was trusted. If anyone could protect the message, it was her. The next morning, they traveled through the forests to reach her base. It was hidden beneath a mountain, covered in trees and mist. No ships flew above, no cameras watched them. Just silence and stone. Dr. Emran was older, with sharp eyes and a calm voice. She listened carefully as Salin told her everything. When Salin finished, the doctor said softly, "You were never a forgotten queen. You were a threat to their lives." She placed the crystal in her scanner and began the process of decoding every layer. "This is more than a message," Emran said. "This is proof. Proof that the council acted against peace." Salin looked at the screen. Lines of data filled it, names, places, decisions that had been hidden from the public. She could barely believe it. "They erased part of our history," she said, "and they expected no one to notice." "Many didn't," Emran replied, "but one human did." She turned to Rourke and smiled. Rourke looked down. "I just followed what felt right." Later that night, Salin stood outside the mountain base. The stars were clear above. For the first time in a long while, she didn't feel small. She felt important again, not because of her title, but because of the truth she carried. Rourke joined her and said, "There will be a time to speak, to stand before them, but we have to do it when the galaxy is listening." Salin turned to him. "Then we make them listen." And somewhere, far away, deep within the council halls, a message was quietly intercepted, a whisper from Earth. A name. Salin was alive, and she was no longer silent. The quiet of the mountain base felt heavier that night. Salin sat near a glowing panel, reading the decoded lines of her mate's hidden message. It wasn't just a personal goodbye. It was a warning, and a key. Each word opened a door to a truth she had never imagined. Her mate had known there were secrets. He had discovered them before anyone else. But instead of using them for power, he had trusted her with them, only her. Outside the base, clouds moved across the night sky. The trees swayed slowly, whispering secrets of their own. Captain Rourke walked down the stone hallway, carrying 2 warm cups of tea. He found Salin still reading, her eyes focused and sharp. "You haven't rested," he said gently. "There's no time for rest," she replied. "Every line here proves what they tried to hide." He placed the tea beside her. "You still have the choice to walk away." She shook her head. "I walked away once. When my mate died, I gave up my voice. I became quiet. I let others decide my place. But this is not just about me anymore. Rourke sat across from her. What will you do? She looked at him. Her expression calm but firm. I will speak, not for revenge, not for attention, but for truth. That morning, Dr. Emran returned with new scans from the data crystal. There's something else, she said. Something your mate didn't say with words. She showed Salin a small section of the data an ancient family seal, hidden beneath code. This symbol hasn't been used in centuries, Emran explained. It belongs to a very old line of rulers, one most people thought no longer existed. Salin stared at it. Her eyes widened. This is my mother's side, she whispered. My family never told me much. I thought the line had ended. Emran nodded. It didn't. You're the last known member of the House of Alari, and according to old laws, that gives you something powerful. What? Rourke asked. A voice, Emran replied. A legal right to challenge the council's silence in front of the Grand Assembly. Rourke leaned back. That hasn't happened in hundreds of years. Emran nodded again. Which means the council will try to stop it quietly. They won't confront her, but they will try to make the assembly ignore her. Salin stood. Then we make sure they can't. In the days that followed, they contacted old allies scholars, truth keepers, voices from forgotten corners of the galaxy. Some had once served her kingdom. Others had only heard of her mate's legacy. But each one remembered the time of peace, and each one agreed to help soon. A network of quiet support began to form. Messages were shared. Records were opened. Even a few members of the council, still honest in their hearts, began to listen in secret. But Salin didn't just want to speak with power. She wanted to speak with purpose. So she wrote a message, a public one, a message to every planet, every race, every soul that had once believed in unity. That it was simple, calm, and clear. I am not here to demand. I am here to remind. The truth is not lost. It was hidden, but now it is seen. We cannot forget what peace once meant, and we must not let silence guide our future. When the message was sent, no one expected what happened next. First, a small world in the outer rings sent their reply. We hear you. Then another, your voice matters. And then more, dozens, hundreds. One message said, we remember your mate. We remember you. In a matter of days, a quiet wave of support had formed without force, without fear, without noise, just hearts. Opening again, Rourke watched the map as each new voice added a soft light to the galaxy. You've done something rare, he said. You've made people care without asking for anything. Salin smiled gently. I didn't give them something new. I gave them something they forgot they still had. And somewhere, far from Earth, deep inside the council's chambers, a quiet meeting began. The lights were dim. Faces serious. She cannot be ignored anymore, one of them said. But if we speak against her, we show we fear her, said another. A third leaned forward. Then let us not speak. Let us wait. But in that silence, something had already changed. Salin had found her voice again. And this time, the stars were listening. The sky above Earth's hidden lake was covered in soft morning light. Mist floated over the calm water. Salin stood quietly at the edge, her long cloak moving gently with the breeze. Her reflection in the lake had changed. No longer did she see a forgotten queen or a silent widow. Now she saw someone with purpose, someone with a voice. Inside the quiet research base, Captain Rourke watched a large display screen. Lights continued to blink as messages arrived from across the galaxy. One by one, small colonies, peaceful planets, and even old council workers were sending quiet support. Some offered words, others offered facts. A few even sent ancient records that matched the hidden truth from her mate's message. They're not just listening now, Rourke said. They're standing with you. Salin entered the room and looked at the screen. She didn't smile, but her eyes were full of calm strength. They were waiting, she said. They just needed one person to step forward first. Double quotes. Dr. Emran walked in holding a small datapad. You've been invited, she said. By who? Rourke asked. The Hall of Balance, Emran replied. A neutral place, not controlled by the council. They want to hear her speak in a quiet session. Salin raised an eyebrow. Why now? Because even silence has limits, Emran said. When too many voices begin to whisper the same truth, someone has to listen before it grows louder. Salen agreed. The meeting was set for 3 days. Later, until then, she prepared not with weapons, not with force, but with truth. Rourke helped her go through every message, every document. They built a timeline that showed the slow fading of her world. From the Council's view, it was not an accident. It was a pattern, and now it would be seen but in the quiet corners of Earth's systems. Other eyes were watching too. A ship entered the Solar Range, a transport vessel that once worked with the Council. It didn't carry flags, it didn't send greetings, but it sent signals to old satellites, trying to learn where Salen was staying, inside Earth's intelligence division. Alerts began to light up. "They're trying to locate her," said a young officer. "Do they know she's here?" Someone asked. "No," Emran replied, looking over the data. "But they're guessing, and their guesses are getting closer." Rourke acted quickly. "We'll move her before the meeting, quietly. No trails." But Salen shook her head. "If I run now, I become their story again, a secret, a rumor. I will walk into that meeting openly." Rourke looked at her carefully. "That's a risk." She nodded. So is silence. The day of the session came. The Hall of Balance was located on a peaceful moon covered in white stones, green trees, and quiet water paths. It was built long ago as a place for honest speech, away from power. The halls had no soldiers, no loud voices, and no pressure, just questions and listening. Salen entered the hall with Rourke beside her. She wore a soft blue cloak, the symbol of her ancient family carefully embroidered near her heart. The members of the session sat in a circle, waiting. She stood in the center and began to speak. "I come to you not as a queen, not as a title, but as someone who was once seen and then forgotten." She paused and looked at each face. "I am here because I carry a truth buried for safety, a truth my mate gave to me in his final days. He saw something, he knew something, and he trusted me to protect it." She placed the crystal on the central table. The room dimmed, and the message played. The voice of her mate filled the hall. Calm, steady, brave. When it ended, silence followed. Not a silence of ignoring, but a silence of thought. Then she spoke again. "I do not ask for power. I do not ask for return. I ask only that truth be seen and that we learn from it." After her words, the members spoke privately. No one shouted, no one pointed. They simply discussed, each voice equal. Hours passed. Outside the hall, a message was sent quietly across the stars. She was heard. In the following days, something strange began to happen. Some members of the Galactic Council spoke publicly for the first time. They called for re-examination. They asked for records to be reopened. A few even requested Salen to be invited to speak in the main council session, a thing no widow had ever been allowed to do. News channels across space started showing her image, not as a forgotten figure, but as a quiet symbol of courage. People didn't shout her name in the streets, but in homes, in small ships, and in quiet places. They spoke about her with respect. She stood when no one did. She spoke what many were too afraid to say. She reminded us who we were, and in the calm hills of Earth. Salen walked near the lake again. Rourke joined her, carrying a small screen. "You've received a new message," he said. She looked. It was from a young leader of a planet she had never visited. The message was short. "You showed us how to remember what matters. Thank you." She looked at the water and smiled softly. Change had begun, and this time, it couldn't be hidden. Salen stood alone on the balcony of the space station that orbited the green-blue planet below. She had just returned from the central session of the Galactic Council. It was the first time in many cycles that a voice not born from power was allowed to speak in that chamber, and she did not waste the moment. The words she spoke were quiet, but they moved like soft waves across dry land. She didn't ask for revenge or control. She asked for truth to be remembered, for the lost to be honored, and for every forgotten world like her own to be heard again. Now, she watched the stars and waited. Inside the station, Captain Rourke read the messages coming from across the galaxy. They weren't just political anymore. They were personal. People who had no power, no titles, were now writing letters. Farmers, teachers, scientists, Even children. One message said, "We never knew your story. Now we carry it with us." Double quotes another, "If truth could wear a cloak, it would look like you." And then there was the message from the council itself. It had no stamp, no seal, just a simple sentence. "We are ready to listen." That line changed everything. In the weeks that followed, small lights of change began to appear. Records once locked were now opened. A new platform was created to hear stories from forgotten planets. Salin's homeworld, once marked only as lost, was returned to the star charts. And slowly, people began to speak its name again. One evening, Rourke and Salin sat in the garden dome of the station. The stars above them sparkled, but the silence between them was full of thought. "You didn't just bring your world back," Rourke said. "You reminded others not to let theirs be taken." Salin looked up at the stars. "Maybe that was always the reason I was spared." He smiled. "What will you do now?" She didn't answer at once. Then softly, she said, "Help others do what no one else would." As days passed, Salin became something unexpected, not a leader by title, but by example. She traveled quietly to different worlds, sometimes to speak, sometimes just to listen. People called her many things: the silent flame, the voice of the hidden, and even the widow of hope. But to Rourke, she was still just Salin, the woman who had carried a message not meant to be found and turned it into light. On a small moon near the edge of the known systems, a new center was built. It wasn't large. It had no guards, just open doors, soft chairs, and screens to record memories. It was called the Listening Hall. Salin visited it often. One day, a young girl from a mining colony entered the hall. Her voice shook as she spoke of her mother, who once worked for the council but disappeared when she questioned something. The girl had no proof, just memories. Salin sat with her, listened to every word, and then helped her record the story. "Even a whisper," she said, "can become something greater when heard." As time passed, the listening hall filled with stories. Some were joyful, some were sad, but all were real. And in every one, there was a piece of what Salin had once carried, a spark of truth, held close and finally shared. Years later, a new generation would learn about the quiet woman who stood in front of the council with only a crystal and a memory. They would ask why she did it, and the answer would be simple: because no one else would. And that was enough.